Is Imperial worth spending your money on? A price tag short of 30 bucks, the 12-person indie dev team called Secret Mode is trying to stamp their footprint into the roguelike genre. Their pride and joy, Imperial, is practically just an ARPG that has you exploring a vast monolith as your main point of interest, searching for answers about the universe and life itself. Expect, we got like many different boss battles, many different fights, many different variable enemies to come across. There's a lot of loot to also go around. There's also distinctive weapon archetypes. I also want to say thank you to the dev team for gifting me a key to review this game, but I will say this entire version of the game that I'm reviewing will focus on the overall gameplay, visuals, audio, and my overall final thoughts on Secret Mode's indie action RPG. So other than that, let's just hop right in. Let's see if Empyreal is actually worth buying. So starting off, we actually have the gameplay overview, right? I want to just talk a little bit about the gameplay, what you could expect when you're playing the game. So first things first is to understand how does Empyreal work. It is based off the Cartagem expeditions. Now this part right here is essentially the major roguelike aspect. So Cartagems are essentially lootable items that act as your overall key to these procedurally generated levels within the monolith. Practically think of them as just your randomized normal dungeons or expeditions. Now, you can acquire these cartagems by defeating enemies or actually interacting with certain NPCs that are actually in the main hub area or even out and about, because each catagem has random attributes that influence the level you're about to enter. So, you get different loot tables, you get the different difficulty modifiers, the scaling of enemies' health and damage and just overall aggression could change. I felt a little bit of weird AI differences during a couple of my runs. Of course, after every run, you do have your initial boss encounters. And you also can tell which boss you're coming across, but you really can't get too much information on what they can and cannot do. Now, this overall mechanic provides the primary gameplay loop that you'll be playing through majority of your time here. You'll constantly be acquiring cartagems and venturing into the different unique challenges, and as well as just overall reaping the rewards or getting your cheeks absolutely clapped. Now the randomness ensures replayability and encourages overall just adapting to the different circumstances. Now, of course, this is a roguelike, so I will say I do like one thing that they have added to the game, which they call it reset charges, which think of a reset charge as your lives, so to speak, within, a single cartagem run. Now, you start each cartagem with a decent amount of, reset charges. Normally, I get maybe 2 or 3 every time I run into it. I'm probably going to pay too close attention to my overall given amount, but I always felt like it was 2 or 3. But you can definitely find more by opening chests and when you're checking through the enemy's loot. Now, one thing you do have to be careful because the game will tempt you. I still have yet to figure out how this exactly works, but you can actually save a other warrior who is practically on death's door by giving them a reset charge. So if I'm not mistaken, this is dealing with the multiplayer aspect of it, because essentially this seems like just a single player game, but I feel like there is some form of multiplayer aspect where a person died in another world and you can technically gift them a research charge. Now that seems just I'm probably overthinking it a little too much, but that's just from what I'm noticing. I feel like that should be a little bit more explained. I'll get to my gripes and complaints a little bit about the game, but if that was explained just a little bit better, or I probably missed it somewhere, just having that refresher would definitely help out. But of course, why does your reset charges matter? Because it overall adds and introduces a layer of risk and consequence without being just overly punishing. So if you lose all of your reset charges, you basically fail the cartagem run, but you can retain any loot that was collected and regain the consumables that you up to your last checkpoint, because there are consumables. You can throw grenades, you can imbue your weapons with elemental damage. Like, there's many things, so you can actually get to keep that for the next run. This overall helps encourage just overall exploration and experimentation while also trying to survive. Now, I did mention earlier in the video about weapon archetypes. So one thing you will note is that there is 3 very different archetypes that you can go from. There's the glaive, there's your mason shield, and there's your cannon. So essentially, before you enter the monolith, before you enter any cartagem, you can choose one of these archetypes. Now, at the very beginning of the game, you can utilize your overall background, but you can always change your archetype at any point in time. So the glaive, which is my favorite weapon so far, basically focuses on agility, dealing quick damage, being able to, deflect the enemy's attacks. You can build the stun meter up, and overall just teleporting for just high mobility, which I've used the teleporting feature quite a lot when it came to fighting the bosses. Next, we have the Mason Shield. Now, of course, the Mason Shield is now much slower. It is a stark contrast to the glaive. You now have to emphasize defense. There's your blocking, parrying attacks. You really need to focus on that while also trying to deal damage as well. And of course, we have our ranged variation, so you can kind of see that the game still follows a specific archetype, as in like rogue, tank, and as well as like a support system of some of that nature. But this case, we have our cannon archetype. Utilizes 3 ammo types: your shotgun, machine gun, sniper. I've seen like a rocket launcher in there somewhere. And you also can essentially do like perfect reloads to be able to do increased damage. But I didn't really play too much of the cannon. I probably touched it like once or so, but I'm more of a in-your-face type of person. But this system overall provides significant player choice in how they can approach combat differently. Now, of course, because like I said, every time you go through a cartagem, you can actually just change which unique play style that you're more familiar with, and just allowing us to experiment and find what exactly suits us the best, because it just adds a little bit of depth to the combat beyond just your usual simple attacks and dodging. Now, every time I kept speaking about cartagems, we got to talk about your downtime. So the downtime we got to think about is the overall hub area, where, this is your central location where you practically interact with the main cast for the game. There's, of course, your blacksmith out there who helps you upgrade your gear. There's the leader, who is I think he's like a co-leader, co-captain, but he seems like he's a dick to your character immediately as soon as you start the game. Like, this dude absolutely hates you and almost tried to get you killed by sending you to a very dangerous cartagem. But one thing you will know is that when you talk to all the NPCs, they always have some form of information. They offer a couple of quests as well. There's also unique interactions based on your chosen background, which I actually really do enjoy the background, so to speak, because when you're looking at the background, the character creation is just very slim pickings. Essentially, it's not really super advanced like most games out there. But what I do like is that you can actually choose 7 different backgrounds for your character that will alter how your character plays. The overall customization of just understanding your character just really adds that bit of RPG, that role-playing feeling that we're looking for. I feel like some RPGs kind of forget why they are role-playing games, so it's definitely something to like when we're overall looking at what exactly that we have in mind, because overall, like I said, all of it has like very subtle but meaningful role playing. It's not as deep as traditional RPGs or some of the crazier MMOs out there, but the character background adds a layer of just that role playing and personalization. I actually like that added touch. It really encourages us to really consider our character's history in our head. Everything's head canon. This doesn't really affect too much crazy that I've noticed when I was playing about the overall game world. Like, I just noticed that I can actually click different dialogue options, and other than that, my gameplay still relatively stayed the same, so to speak. So in essence, Empyreal's core gameplay just revolves around venturing into randomized cartagem expeditions, managing your limited lives, utilizing distinct weapon archetypes for combat. And like I said, you got the hub area that is like your main point of progression, just allowing you to overall improve your character and gear between the cartagem runs. And it's, like I said, it's not bad. The game itself is fun. It has a fun loop, and you can get stuck playing the game for a minute, like I technically did. I was like, man, Like I was having moments of like, okay, this part's slowing me down, but then it's just like I'm still playing more. I want to see how far I can get. And I feel like that's just the overall formula for a nice roguelike, right? But we talked about the gameplay. We got to talk a little bit about the story premise. Now, at its core, the story of Empyreal revolves around a colossal, mysterious structure known as the Monolith. This quite imposing entity, and the game really showcases that as you're walking up to it. Like, this thing is massive, but this thing basically just dominates the landscape. It just towers over everything, but essentially it's holding secrets, and our job is to just delve real deep inside and basically uncover the secrets and hope to help our civilization against this war. I'm still trying to pick up the some of the actual lore bits and pieces through some of the characters, so I'm just like, okay, interesting. But it's not just a usual casual exploration. There is some form of sense of purpose and perhaps even urgency, which it just drives your character in game to be here. Now, the Monolith technically has 4 distinct biomes called quadrants. Each quadrant is a unique area with its own atmosphere, challenges, and essentially its own secrets added to the lore. Now, one thing you will note when it comes to these quadrants is that they all are hand drawn by the developers. Like, everything is like, when you actually look at them all, it just shows like this deliberate design, and you can really tell the lore through each quadrant. Like, it matters in a way. But with these quadrants, you definitely, of course, need to access these quadrants through the Carter gems. In order to get to these Carter gems, you have to beat enough Carter gems in order to get to the final quadrant to finish that quadrant, so to speak. And there is just that randomized element behind it, because the Carter gems particularly is interesting from a story perspective is that they apply a variety of random attributes to each level they unlock. This includes like the different loot tables, difficulty levels, the specific bosses that we may encounter, and this randomization suggests that the Monolith itself might be a different entity. Now, this is headcanon, but I feel like it is offering a dynamic and unpredictable, constantly shifting, presenting new challenges. Like, it has a mind of its own. So as I'm still continue playing this game, I'm still understanding that there's current things that is not just being told to us. Like, this thing has a lot more that it has. So I will say that trying to continue on is what really also is helping drive me to continue playing this game, because I want to see like exactly what does this mean. But in essence, the story premise of Empyreal is just about venturing into this mysterious, quite multi-layer structure, the Monolith, and it is utilizing different expeditions like the Carter gems to access the unique biomes. And that right there is essentially the story premise of Empyreal. Of course, we can't have a nice RPG without some form of understanding the visuals and audio of this game. Now, the architecture in this game is a highlight in itself, something I found visually appealing and perhaps intricate. There's definitely a good level of detail and artistic design that went into the crafting for the initial areas that you will see. But one thing is to remember is that the different biomes that we will experience are handcrafted by the devs and are actually pretty good looking. These areas have a distinct visual identity and are more engaging than the hub area. The fact that they are handcrafted really hits home for some, and it really shows a great artistic direction for each environment, aiming for visual variety and as well as appeal. But of course, one thing about visuals is just the contrast. Now, in contrast to the Monolith's core and the biomes, we see the hub area. Now, this is the area that we are in all the time when we're exiting our expeditions. But to me, I feel like the hub area just looks a bit plain. This right here, like if you look at the central area where you interact with the different NPCs, it just lacks a visual flair and detail that is present in the gameplay zones. It honestly, it could be more functional in its design, just you know, let's add a little bit of more striking visuals that really hit home. Like it just feels like the hub area is bland and the actual areas are just they really put the work into it. But the visuals just seem to be just a mixed bag for me. The initial tutorial area within the monolith just has just these interesting architectures, and the various biomes, just they look appealing, they look great, they look very well crafted. But the central hub areas appears to be like less visually impressive and somewhat plain in comparison. Next we have like the audio. Right now, regarding the audio, Empyreal supports the game's atmosphere, but doesn't particularly stand out. The soundtrack and sound effects are competent and serve their purpose in immersing the player in the world and during combat. Now, however, they don't seem to be, have any unique or memorable qualities that I felt really compelled to just truly highlight, just because one thing is I'm a sucker for a soundtrack. Like I've been playing JRPGs my whole life, so I'm used to playing like hearing some great soundtracks, and I've played a lot of games, and it's just this soundtrack could be a lot better. It could be a little bit more just in there, like really sucking me into the environment. But in essence, the audio seems to be just a solid foundation that contributes to the overall experience, but it just not have that defining feature. And it's just like I said, this could just be a me thing, but it just provides just necessary cues and ambiance for gameplay, but it just does not elevate the game in a significant way. And one thing you always hear about a lot of games out there is like, dude, the soundtrack, the score, the music, whatever the case may be, just is absolutely perfect. So that's one of my gripes. But speaking of gripes, I have a nice little list of things that I was not the biggest fan of. First things first was the lack of punchiness in combat. So despite that, the animations looking very impactful, and the execution moves that you go through, the attacks don't really convey a strong sense of weight or impact when they connect with the enemies. So this right here made combat just a little less satisfying in a sense. And then moving on to combat, the lack of a target lock on system it just led through like a little bit. I was disoriented during combat, especially when you face multiple enemies, because I feel like there should be an option for me to toggle it on or off. It just makes it harder to focus on certain attacks when you're doing it and just try to manage how the battlefield's going on, especially when you have like those one-on-one moments. Like I should have the need to be able to lock on and not lock on, right? Whenever I want that option to. But another thing, like while you're swinging, I have an issue with like the animation that happens, but like let me explain. So when you are doing a combo, like your character becomes temporarily like stuck in the animation for a few seconds. This leaves you vulnerable to attacks, and it's actually got me kind of messed up quite a few times. But I pointed out most of these highlight areas where I feel that the responsiveness of the gameplay could be more improved. But I'm not also like not really trying to be too harsh on this game about like frame rate or graphic fidelity, because both of those seems perfectly fine, but they are something that is the frame rate I didn't have an issue with. The graphic fidelity, like I said, the visuals could be a little bit better in the hub area, but overall the performance issues of Empyreal just centers around just tactile feedback of combat, the control and targeting with the lack of lock on, and the flow responsiveness or just being interrupted through the animations. The game might have, like other technical performance aspects, but these right here are the key like gameplay related things that I have just picked up in my time reviewing the game. Now, Empyreal has the foundations of a compelling action RPG roguelike with its intriguing world, but the unique spin on roguelike exploration through card gems and the distinct flavor each weapon archetype just brings to combat. I do particularly enjoy the character background system and the genuinely captivating architecture with the Monolith starting area. But there are definitely some areas where Imperial could just use some polish. The combat, while visually engaging, could just benefit immensely from a greater sense of impact. The lack of a lock-on feature can lead to some chaotic. It can lead to some better moments when you're in fights, and of course helping out with the post combo like animation locks definitely leave you feeling just quite vulnerable at times. So these right here are the elements I hope the devs can address in the future updates to truly elevate the your gameplay. But despite these current like shortcomings, and I wouldn't say like I'm not faulting the dev team, like they did a great job for a $30 game. 12 people, like indie games are starting to rise. Empyreal just presents a unique and promising experience. The blend of handcrafted biomes and just procedurally generated card gems offers a compelling loop, and the core combat mechanics show a lot of potential. But I want to know what your thoughts or initial impressions of Empyreal. Are you going to be playing it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But if you like today's episode, then definitely recommend somebody to the channel and joining the Outcast, and like the video. But if you want to support the channel, then join the channel memberships. Other than that, stay safe out there. It's been your host, KSD TV, signing out. Peace.